My name is Olivia. I'm 29. And 3 lines of text just freed me from 29 years of servitude. The notification lit up my phone at exactly 7 a.m. on Christmas Eve, right as I was pouring my first cup of coffee in my quiet Buffalo apartment. It was from my father, Richard. Just 3 lines. We've decided to keep dinner intimate this year. Just me, Daniel, and a few close friends. We'll catch up with you after the holidays. I stared at the screen. Intimate. That was his code word, the one he'd used for years to signal that his latest much younger girlfriend would be at the table, and my presence, with its unspoken judgment and inconvenient questions, wasn't welcome. Daniel, my brother, the golden child who'd never held a real job, never paid a bill, never faced a consequence, would be there. I would not. I didn't cry. I didn't throw my phone across the kitchen. I didn't even type out a pleading message asking why I wasn't enough. Instead, a strange calm settled over me, cold, clear, and absolute. For nearly 3 decades, I'd been the fixer, the silent safety net, the one who showed up with money, solutions, and grace under pressure. Today, I was simply expendable. I set my coffee down, walked to my desk, and opened my laptop. My hands didn't shake. I bypassed the savings account I'd been meticulously building since I turned 18. The emergency fund, the retirement cushion, the quiet escape hatch, and initiated a wire transfer, $650,000. The entire balance. The recipient? The county bank holding the foreclosure title on Blackwood Ridge, the sprawling snow-draped ranch in Wyoming that Daniel had bragged about for months before his financing collapsed, because shockingly, banks don't lend $500,000 to unemployed gamblers with maxed-out credit cards. I hit send. The screen blinked, transfer complete. 20 minutes later, I was in my truck, heater blasting, tires crunching over fresh snow. I drove past my childhood home without slowing. I saw my father's car in the driveway. I saw the soft glow of the Christmas tree I'd bought and assembled for them last year. I didn't tap the brakes. I kept driving, watching the house shrink in my rearview mirror until it became a small, meaningless speck against the white landscape. I wasn't going to their dinner. I was going to my ranch. Drop a comment right now. Where are you watching from? What time is it where you are? Because what I did next changed everything, and I want you with me when I tell you how. The drive to Wyoming felt less like a journey and more like a homecoming I hadn't known I was waiting for. When I pulled up the unplowed driveway to Blackwood Ridge, the snow was knee-deep, the pines heavy with frost, and the air so still it felt sacred. The house loomed ahead, stone and timber, dark and silent, like a sleeping bear curled against the cold. It wasn't beautiful in the traditional sense. It was raw, unyielding, and utterly mine. I stepped out of the truck, the wind slicing through my coat like a blade, and for the first time in years, I took a full breath. My name is Olivia. I'm 29 years old, and standing there, snow stinging my cheeks, deed in my glove compartment with only my name on it, I felt like a real person, not just an extension of my father's ego or my brother's convenience. Inside, the air smelled of dust, old wood, and neglect. In the living room, leaning against the stone hearth, was a piece of plywood Daniel had left behind during his grand tour 3 months ago. Painted in sloppy red letters, Daniel's Lodge, coming soon. He'd never paid a dime, never signed a contract, but he'd already claimed the space, already imagined the parties, the Instagram posts, the borrowed glory. I didn't throw it away. I picked it up, placed it over my knee, and snapped it in half. The crack echoed through the empty house like a gunshot. I tossed the splinters into the fireplace and struck a match. As the flames consumed his fantasy, the room warmed. Not just in temperature, but in spirit. That was the first real heat the house had known all winter. My phone buzzed in my pocket. Probably Richard, realizing I wouldn't be there to diffuse the tension with his girlfriend or rescue the dry turkey. Probably Daniel, wondering if I'd brought his gifts, which of course I'd paid for anyway. I didn't look. Instead, I opened my settings and started blocking. One by one, I silenced the voices that only called when their wallets were empty or their lies needed covering. It wasn't cruelty. It was hygiene, like scrubbing a wound so it could finally heal. I didn't hire contractors. I didn't wait for permission. The next morning, I drove into town, bought a ladder, a drill, and heavy-duty commercial deadbolts. I climbed onto the roof in the snow, drilling high-definition cameras into the eaves, angled to cover every approach. The gate, the driveway, the porch. I replaced the flimsy lock on the front door with a deadbolt so solid it felt like anchoring a ship. I drove each screw in deep, feeling the wood resist, then yield. The final click of that lock sliding home was the most satisfying sound I'd ever heard. It wasn't just metal meeting metal, it was the sound of a boundary that couldn't be guilt-tripped, bargained with, or ignored. That night, the wind howled against the windows, throwing snow like shrapnel. But for the first time in my life, the cold stayed outside. I sat on the floor in the dark living room, wrapped in a wool blanket, listening to the silence. It didn't feel lonely, it felt like ownership. They thought they'd exiled me to the wilderness. They didn't realize they'd just handed me a kingdom. The next morning, sunlight streamed through frost-rimmed windows, casting long shadows across scarred wooden floors. In the quiet light, the weight of what I'd done settled fully. I'd spent $650,000 in cash, every dollar I'd saved, every dream I'd deferred. It sounds reckless, but I don't do reckless. I do math. My name is Olivia, and I'm a forensic accountant. People think that means I shuffle spreadsheets all day. What I actually do is track stolen money for federal agencies. I find the shell companies cartels use to buy racehorses. I trace the offshore accounts where CEOs hide bonuses before declaring bankruptcy. I look at numbers and see the ghosts of greed hiding behind them. But for all my training, I'd been blind to the slow-motion theft under my own roof. I opened my laptop and pulled up a file named Family Expenses. It was a ledger I'd never shown anyone. Line by line, it told a story of 29 years of emotional and financial robbery. There was the $50,000 I loaned Richard when his business failed, a loan that became a gift the moment I signed the check. There was the $12,000 for Daniel's medical bills, which I later discovered covered a settlement after he broke a man's jaw in a bar fight. And then the big one, $200,000. 3 years ago, Daniel owed money to men who didn't send invoices. They sent threats. Richard called me sobbing, saying they'd kill his son if the debt wasn't paid by dawn. So I did what I always did. I liquidated my portfolio, wired the cash, and made the problem vanish. Their gratitude? A month later, Richard bought Daniel a brand new truck. Daniel told everyone he'd negotiated his way out. I became invisible again. Buying this ranch wasn't impulsive, it was asset protection. I knew Richard was running out of cash. I knew Daniel was gambling again. I knew it was only a matter of time before they came for my grandmother's trust, the one account I'd kept legally separate. If I hadn't turned that money into land in my name, Richard would have guilted, bullied, or outright stolen it within 6 months. This ranch wasn't dirt and snow. It was a vault. I'd turned liquid into legacy. They thought I bought it to be petty. They didn't realize I bought it to stop the bleeding. 3 weeks of silence followed. Thick, heavy. The kind that presses on your chest like a storm brewing. I spent my days working remotely, auditing a shell corporation in the Caymans from my living room, watching snow pile against the fence line like a barricade. I knew they'd come. Men like Richard don't accept rejection. They treat it like a temporary setback in a negotiation they're destined to win. It happened on a Tuesday afternoon. I was in the dim glow of my laptop when the ground vibrated, a heavy diesel engine crunching through the snow. I didn't rush to the window. I didn't need to. I tapped my security app. On the screen, a black rental truck rolled up my driveway. Richard stepped out first, wearing his business negotiation coat, the one with the fur collar he used to intimidate subcontractors. Daniel followed, scanning the property with that entitled smirk, kicking snow off his boots like he owned the place. And behind them, a man in a cheap suit holding a clipboard, a realtor. They weren't here to talk. They were here to list. I watched from the shadows, heart steady, as Richard walked to the front door. He didn't knock. He pulled a key from his pocket, my old apartment key from Portland, and tried it in the lock. It didn't turn. He jiggled it, shoved it harder, then stepped back, annoyed, as if the door had personally insulted him. He said something to Daniel, who laughed and pointed to the truck bed. Richard returned with a crowbar, red paint chipped, steel heavy with history. I zoomed in on the feed. I needed to see his face. Was he angry? Scared? Guilty? No. He looked calm, entitled. That's when I finally understood the trap I'd lived in for 29 years. A stranger breaks into your house because they want your stuff. A father breaks in because he believes you are his stuff. In his mind, my boundaries didn't exist. My money, my name, my home, they were all just extensions of him. He wasn't committing a crime. He was correcting an error. He wedged the crowbar into the doorframe. The splintering wood echoed like a scream. The realtor flinched but didn't stop them. Richard leaned in, grunting with effort, and with a sickening pop, the frame gave way. The door swung open. He stepped inside, crowbar in hand, wiping his boots on my rug like he belonged there. I stayed in the kitchen shadows, phone raised, recording every second. They moved with the confidence of thieves who believe they're owed their loot. Daniel kicked my leather couch, the one I'd bought with my first big bonus, and said, "We can get maybe $500 for this." He pulled neon orange stickers from his pocket and slapped one on my coffee table. "Garage sale stuff," he muttered. Richard was already on his phone, pacing. "Yeah, listing goes live in an hour. Cash offers only. Need a quick close." He paused, scanning my home with a sneer. "Clean it out. Anything personal? Dumpster. This place needs to be a blank slate." They weren't just trespassing. They were erasing me. Stripping the house down to sell its bones to cover Daniel's latest debt. I didn't feel fear. I felt the cold, precise click of a trap closing. I watched as Daniel picked up a vase. My mother's. One of the few things I had left of her, and tossed it onto a pile of junk. That was my signal. I pressed the panic button on my app. No siren. No alarm. Just light. 8 halogen floodlights along the perimeter blazed to life, turning the snowy yard into blinding daylight. Richard flinched, shielding his eyes. Through the windows, blue and red strobes cut through the glare. Sheriff Daniels's cruiser roared up, blocking their truck. He stepped out, hand resting on his belt, breath pluming in the cold. And beside him, Maya, my best friend, my lawyer, the woman who knew every secret I'd ever buried. Richard recovered fast. He smoothed his coat, flashed his reasonable man smile, and greeted the sheriff like a host at a barbecue. "Just a wellness check," he said smoothly. "She's not answering calls. We got worried. Had to check on family property." He pointed at the broken door. "Unstable. We're protecting our interests." Sheriff Daniels didn't move. He stared at the splintered wood. "That's not a wellness check," he said flatly. "That's a felony." Richard's voice rose. "Family property? Trustee rights?" I stepped into the light. "I live here." He turned, eyes narrowing. The ranch was bought with trust funds. You can't just... Maya opened her black binder. The metal rings snapped loud in the cold air. Clause 404, she said calmly. Any trustee who commits a felony against trust property is immediately removed and forfeits all inheritance. The crowbar slipped from Richard's hand. You set me up, he hissed. No, I said. I just let you be yourself. Then, his final play. Arrest her! She stole my truck. The sheriff checked his radio. We've got a report. I handed him a court document. Quiet title ruling. Your name was legally removed last month. The sheriff's expression hardened. Filing a false police report makes 2 felonies. He cuffed Richard without another word. As the Shaw cruiser pulled away, headlights cutting through the snow, the trust transferred automatically to me. Later, Maya and I sat on the porch, snow falling soft and silent around us. My phone buzzed. Daniel, demanding I post bail. I blocked the number. Then I walked to the gate, pulled it shut, and locked it for the first time with true peace in my chest. I wasn't alone. I was free. A soft whine came from the doorway. I turned to see Leor and Ruby, my bonded pair, the German Shepherd and Doberman I'd rescued from a Brooklyn shelter. Standing there, snow dusting their fur, eyes bright with loyalty. They patted over, pressed against my legs, warm and real. I brought them inside, built a fire, and watched the flames dance. I used to fix broken families. Now I protect whole ones, like theirs, like mine. If you've ever been the reliable one, the one who gives until you disappear, I see you. Setting boundaries isn't cruel, it's conservation. You can't pour from an empty cup, especially when someone's been siphoning it for decades. True generosity begins with self-protection. If this story resonated, hit like and subscribe. It helps more people find stories like this. Comment below. Have you ever had to choose yourself over family expectations? Your story matters. And if you're able, consider supporting a local animal rescue. Some bonds, like Leor and Ruby's, should never be broken. They thought silence meant I had nothing to say. But sometimes, the loudest no is the one you don't speak. It's the life you build after you walk away.